When I first started the piano, I, like a lot of other people, started self-taught. And if I was to start again today, there is a lot of things that I would do very, very differently. So in this video, I want to tell you how you can start learning the piano self-taught, including what you need, how to set goals, what you should learn and why. I'm going to talk about some common problems that a lot of people run into, how to avoid them and how to fix them. I'll give you some good video, book and course recommendations to best fit what you want to learn. And I'm also going to talk about how to keep going and how to get better over the long term. There are definitely some advantages to learning self-taught, such as, let's be honest, you can play what you want, and obviously it's a lot cheaper to learn without a teacher. However, there are also some disadvantages to learning self-taught, and that is that you don't know what you need to learn. And you can also run into problems that are going to affect your playing long term, such as if you don't understand something that you need to know, or if you've skipped a certain element of practice like sight reading. But hopefully in this video, I'm going to alleviate some of those disadvantages of playing self-taught. So let's start with what you actually need to get started. Firstly, you're going to need something to play on, and if you don't have something to play on already, then the best thing to get is a digital piano or an acoustic piano that has 88 keys, weighted keys, and that has a sustain pedal. If you have an instrument that has those things, then it's going to last you a pretty long time. The other thing that you're going to need is an idea about what you actually want to achieve by playing the piano. That can be as simple as you want to be able to pick up a piece of music and play songs that you like. It could be that you want to get to grade 8 piano. It could be that you're a music producer and you want to get really good at music theory and use the piano to do that. There are lots of reasons why you might want to learn the piano, because if you are someone, for example, that wants to be able to work songs out by ear, then it's going to be pretty pointless sitting down and reading a Bach prelude. So that's what you need. Let's talk about how you're actually going to get there. So the way that I stayed committed to learning the piano without losing motivation was to set long-term goals, short-term goals, and very short-term goals. Now, to me, long-term goals are something that should take around 6 months to a year to complete. For example, taking a graded piano exam or learning a Beethoven sonata. Longer-term goals tend to be outcome-related, so they're goals where you want to get something out of it at the end. However, long-term goals on their own, they're very difficult to stay motivated, which is why you should have short-term goals and very short-term goals. These should both be based on input rather than outcome, and by that, your short-term and very short-term goals should be based on what you actually do rather than what you're actually going to get out of it. For example, a short-term input goal might be, this week I'm going to practice 4 times for 30 minutes. And that is a goal that is entirely dependent on whether you do it or don't do it. And then there are very short-term goals, and that is things that you're going to do today. Now, once again, this should be input related rather than outcome related. So it needs to be something that you can do without the guarantee of an outcome. But your very short-term goals should always be in service of your short-term goals, and your short-term goals should always be in service of your long-term goals. And here's an example for you. So I might have a long-term goal of achieving grade 1 on the piano. And in order to be able to do that in 6 months' time, this week I'm going to practice 6 days a week for 30 minutes. And in my practice today, that is 30 minutes long, I'm going to practice 2 of the scales, I'm going to practice the first 4 bars of a piece, and I might also do 4 sight reading exercises. And then the key to this is once you've actually achieved your long-term goal, then you need to set another achievable long-term goal straight away. If you have constant long-term back-to-back goals, then it just becomes habit, and on a day-to-day basis, it's just something that you do, rather than thinking, today I can't be bothered. But what do you actually need to learn when you're first starting to teach yourself the piano? Well, that largely depends on what you actually want to get out of learning the piano. But there are 5 main categories of things that you can learn. The first is sheet music reading, there's scales, chords, music theory, and oral skills, which is just listening. Now, I would suggest for anyone that's teaching themselves the piano, especially at the basic beginner level, to try and start learning a little bit of all of these, because they are all very, very important. So let's talk about what's involved in each of these 5 categories and why you actually might want to learn them. So firstly, sheet music reading. You can very easily see visually on a piece of music exactly what's happening, and composers can be really specific when writing sheet music as to how they want you to play it. If you just play by ear, for example, then you are playing everything how you want to play it, which is not a bad thing. But learning how other people write music and seeing what is possible in music can expand how you interpret something played by ear, because the more music you've read, the more tools you've got. And then there's scales. Scales are what music is made from. On a piano, there are 12 different unique keys, and major and minor scales, which are the most common types of scales, narrow those 12 notes down to just 7. So if you are reading a piece of music or you're listening to a piece of music and you know what scale that that piece of music is using, it becomes a lot easier to work out what the notes should be. And when you practice scales on the piano, what you're really doing is giving yourself an opportunity to get really dexterous, but you're also making that set of notes automatic in your hands. So if you know the scale of G major really well, and you come across a piece that's in the key of G major, then your hand is going to automatically know which notes you're going to be playing on the keys. Then there's chords. There are certain patterns of chords that are really important to learn, such as triads or seventh chords. These types of chords are really common and come up time and time again. So if you learn the standard patterns of chords that you're going to see, then when you see them or hear them in a piece of music, your hand is automatically going to know where to go. And a lot of learning the piano is about patterns and pattern recognition. And that's why people that first start learning an instrument find it so difficult to sight read music, because what they're trying to do is read every single individual note on the page, whereas someone who is more experienced in music will look at a piece of music and just see it as a set of patterns that are happening that they've seen before in other pieces. Then there's music theory. If you understand how music works, then it's very easy to write your own music, to write transcriptions or interpretations of other people's music. If you're a singer, then you can change the key of a piece of music so that it fits better in your vocal range. So learning music theory is very, very helpful. And it's kind of interesting. And then there's oral skills, and oral skills just mean listening skills. So learning to hear different notes and how they relate to each other, and learning how different types of chords sound. If you listen to a piece of music and you really like that piece of music,
there's no music playing,
and you want to understand why you really like that piece of music so you can recreate it or write something similar. Or if you want to be able to work something out on the piano by ear, then you're going to want to learn how different intervals sound. And intervals just means the distance between notes. Learning to use your ears is really beneficial, especially if you want to improvise, if you want to play with other people, if you want to work stuff out by ear. It has lots of benefits. So that's what to learn and why. Let's talk about some common problems that people often face when learning by themselves. The first and probably the biggest is tension, and tension is a massive problem because your hands aren't necessarily going to do what you want them to do, and it can be very tempting to force them by tensing your hands. So the first thing you can do about this is, first of all, notice if you are tense or not. If your hands start to ache or you're finding that your hand is becoming rigid, then know that you can and need to do something about it. If your hands are generally tense, then what I would recommend doing is using scales to practice trying to shake your hand out every note like this. By wobbling your hand like that, it means that your hand can't be tense. If you're finding that you're just tense when playing certain parts of pieces, then stop on the notes where you're finding that your hand is tensing and do the same thing, so wobble your hand about. The second common problem that people have is sitting too high or too low at the piano. Now, I'm probably not helping the case here because I always have the piano too high for videos, and that's just so you can see my wonderful face and the keys at the same time. However, the best way to think about where you should sit and where the piano should be positioned is that your arms should be just over a right angle or 90 degrees. So if I was trying to sit at the correct height for this piano, I'd be sitting kind of there. You want it to be so that your hands can sit comfortably and you're not having to do any weird movements to be able to reach the keys. Another common problem is people using weird fingers and doing things like this, or putting their hand upside down. Once again, if you learn scales, then this does combat most of this problem because you learn the correct fingers to use in certain circumstances. But generally, if you're playing a piece of music and you've run out of fingers, then you need to change the fingers you used earlier on, rather than just trying to get through the piece and playing really random fingers and jumping around. My best advice is to just plan the fingers that you're going to use. Another common problem is people looking at their hands rather than looking at the music. Looking at your hands isn't inherently a problem in itself. The problem is, if you are trying to learn to read music, then not looking at the music is not going to help you learn to read music. It also means that if you're reading off a piece of music, then you're missing most of the detail that's in the music if you start to look at your hands as soon as you start to memorize it. So once you've played a piece of music a fair few times and you are starting to memorize it, which will happen, try and consciously follow the music with your eyes rather than looking at your hands. Another common problem is covering mistakes using the sustain pedal. If I play a scale and it sounds like this with the pedal, all of those notes sound the same, but if I play the same scale like this, you can hear a very clear gap between the third and fourth note, and that gap was covered by the pedal, which means although my hand is not doing the thing that I want it to do, the pedal is covering it up, so I don't know that mistake's there. So to combat this, try and play pieces with and without the pedal, and if there are mistakes without the pedal, then fix them rather than just covering it with the pedal. Another common problem is trying to learn really quickly and forcing it. A lot of people, when they first start learning, think that they should be learning more quickly and that they're learning too slow. So they try and force it by learning really difficult pieces or trying to run before they can walk. And although it's okay to do difficult pieces sometimes, you've really got to be careful that you don't try and skip a load of things in order to get there quicker, because it will be obvious in your playing. And the last common mistake that I see people make is that they use stickers on their piano. My blanket recommendation would be to not use stickers on the piano, because instead of learning what the keys actually are, you're just learning to read the letter on the key. It also means that if you're trying to read music, you're associating the dot with the letter rather than the dot with the key. Okay, let's talk about the best resources for learning the piano as a self-taught beginner. Now, firstly, there is a video on YouTube by a YouTube channel called Piano from Scratch, which is essentially a first lesson on how to start playing the piano. And I actually think it's a very good video for those that have never played before and want to know where the keys are on the piano and that kind of thing. It does a very good job of explaining. Another good video on YouTube is a video by a channel called Musicians Inspired, and it's about the landmark system. The landmark system, I think, is the best method for learning how to read sheet music and where all the notes are on the page. And the video by Musicians Inspired is very good at explaining it. And then to plug my own videos, I have done a video that is a complete guide to using the piano pedals. That is an older video that I've made, so I do sound a little bit personalityless. However, I covered the same topic and a lot of other topics that might be interesting in my video that is the top 10 most asked piano questions. And if you want to learn how to play by ear, I've also done several videos on how you can go about starting to learn to play by ear. Then there are a couple of books that I would recommend. First of all is the book It's Never Too Late to Play Piano by Pam Wedgwood. This is the go-to book that I use when I'm teaching adult beginners how to start learning the piano. I think it's very good at explaining, and it's not as slow in progressing as a children's book might be. A good book for children that are learning is the Complete Me and My Piano book. There are lots and lots of beginner piano learning books out there, and all of them are equally as good. You've just got to find something that best fits how you learn. For sight reading, I would recommend my sight reading book. Once you start learning how to read music and you're starting to understand the notes, sight reading is kind of a different skill. Sight reading is your ability to read a piece of music immediately rather than spend some time learning it and perfecting the piece. So my sight reading book, which you can download on my website, is a series of hundreds of exercises that get progressively harder. The problem that I found with a lot of sight reading material out there is that there just isn't enough of it. If you buy a graded sight reading book, for example, there usually are about 55 exercises. And by the time you've got to the end of those exercises, you're probably not that much better than when you started. But I designed the book to get progressively harder, and because there are over 400 exercises, you can just constantly be saturating yourself with note reading. And then for music theory, I would recommend either the Discovering Music Theory series of books or the Music Theory and Practice series of books by ABRSM. Both of these books are following the graded system, so grade 1 to 8. And if you are an absolute beginner, get the grade 1 book, work your way through it, and then when you feel comfortable with that, then you can get the grade 2 book, and so on. It's very methodical with how you work through the music theory and start understanding some really complex topics. And then for courses, there is a series of music theory courses on Udemy by someone called Victoria Williams, who goes through some of the grades of music theory, and she's very good at explaining and getting you to work through how the music theory works. And I am currently working on a playing music by ear course myself, so when that's available, I will recommend that. So let's talk about how to keep going and continuing to get better over a long period of time. Whenever starting any new skill, a lot of people get very excited to start with and then want to practice 6 hours a day, but then burn out and don't want to practice the instrument anymore. I think a lot of that problem will be solved by setting some long-term and short-term goals to hold yourself accountable. But some other things that you can do are things like recording your progress. If you record yourself playing a piece every month or every week or something like that, then you can really start to see your progress. If you really wanted to, you could even start a YouTube channel documenting your progress and then do a 1 year's piano progress video, and then you might find yourself being reacted to by me. Other things that you can do are things like quantifying success and measuring it. For example, if you did a 60-day challenge where you were to try and practice 30 minutes every day for 60 days straight, by the end of the 60 days, you will know whether you've succeeded or not. And that's something that you can quantifiably measure. And finally, you can get some feedback from peers or from musicians. There are lots and lots of Facebook groups with other beginners in that are trying to learn, and they're always giving each other feedback. Or you can ask musicians for their feedback. You can always ask any questions that you have in the comments and I'll answer them. Or you can book in through my website and I will happily tell you how to improve, and I know a lot of other musicians will do that too. But if you want to see me react to someone's 1 year of piano progress, then check out this video and I will see you there.